Hi, this is Daniel Lee from 5th period ELA, and I did my project on a scandal in Bohemia. So the plotline of the book starts off when Sherlock Holmes and Watson receives a mysterious letter from an anonymous person, and Sherlock finds out that the letter was sent by a German in Bohemia, and soon after they read the letter, a chariot arrived with a man in disguise with a mask on his head to keep his identity secret. But Sherlock already knew that it was the king of Bohemia, so the king explained that he was going to get married very soon, but he was afraid that his ex-wife, who is Irene Adler, is going to try to blackmail him by using a photo they took together. And the king asks Sherlock to try to receive the photo and destroy it. The rising action of this story is when Sherlock decides to dress up in disguise as a groom to spy on Irene Adler and to see what she does. And he talked to some stablemen nearby, and they said that a guy named Godfrey Norton visits her a lot, and he comes home and he tells Watson everything he finds out. And the climax of this story is when Sherlock goes back to Irene's estate in disguise, but this time Godfrey is present there, and Godfrey takes Irene to a church while Sherlock secretly follows behind them. He pretended to pray in the church but was listening to their conversations, and he found out that Godfrey and Irene were marrying, and Godfrey even told Sherlock to serve as a witness because there was no one else in the church. And then they all went home, and Sherlock devised a plan to get into Irene's house by having people beat him up, so Irene will have no choice but to protect him and take him into her house. So they also plan to set a fake fire in her house to see what her most prized possession was, which was the photo. And the plan carried out well that night, and Sherlock was beat up and Irene took her in her house as planned. And after he got in the house, they let a smoke bomb in her through her window to imitate the effect of fire. And as predicted, she quickly reached for her hidden photo, only to find out that the fire was fake. And now Sherlock knew where the photo was hidden. So the next day, I guess the following action, the next day, Sherlock quickly informed the king and Watson to go into Irene's house because he knew where it was finally. But when they arrived, the maid told them that Irene was far gone, and they quickly went to the spot where Sherlock thought the photo was, only to find out it had been replaced with the photo of just Irene herself, and the king was enraged until they found the letter that was found with it. And the letter read that she already left and was on a boat, and she said that she had found a better man than the king, and that she had thrown the photo of them two in the water because she had no use of it, and the photo was gone for good, and his work had been done. So these are the elements of the short story. So the characters in the book are Sherlock Holmes, Irene Adler, the King of Bohemia, Dr. Watson, and Godfrey Norton. And there's a lot of other characters, but we don't know much about them. And the setting starts off in Sherlock's home, which is 221B Baker Street, London, but it also shifts over to Irene Adler's house, and it changes over again to the church. The plot is that the king of Bohemia is planning to marry a woman, but his ex-wife has a photo of them two together and is threatening to blackmail him. The conflict is that Irene Adler, who was previously married to the king of Bohemia, threatens to blackmail him with the photo they had together to stop the marriage of the king's new wife. And the resolution was that the problem was solved when Irene was able to find a new husband who was Godfrey Norton, and she didn't really care for the photo anymore, so she threw the photo away and didn't end up blackmailing him. So these were the forensic elements that I found in the story. So the first element was when Watson and Sherlock were first reading the letter they got. Watson noticed that the paper was very strong, and that strong paper meant that it was from a rich or royal family, since it was very expensive and hard to get. And the paper was also very peculiar, and it was nothing like they had seen before, which meant it wasn't from London. So the second forensic element was when Watson held the paper to the light. There were words that were inscribed on the paper, which said EGPGT, and they found out that G with the small t stands for Gesellschaft, which is company in German, and the Co and P stands for Papier, and they found out that the person who wrote the letter was a rich German from the Kingdom of Bohemia. Forensic element number 3 was that when Watson was reading over the letter, he concluded that the writing was a man's writing, so it had to be a man. Forensic element number 4 was that when the man arrived anonymous, Sherlock was able to conclude that he was the king of Bohemia because he was drawn by 2 horses, and the horses were very nice. And when he entered the room, he wore very expensive and rich clothes, which was meant only for the royal. And the last forensic element was that Sherlock concluded that the photograph was very well hidden because Irene's house had been broken into 5 times, and the photo was still nowhere to be found. And she was very protective of the photos since she wouldn't give it up for any amount of money. And Sherlock concluded that the photo was very well hidden and he needed to see exactly where the photo was, which led him to attempt to get into her house. So the final slide is a character analysis, and Sherlock Holmes is the first character, and he's obviously the main character which all the stories revolve around. And first impression is that he's a very intellectual person. He's really quick and witty, and he has really good memory, which he uses to his advantage to be a good detective. He's also really calm, and he never panics when things go wrong, and he's also never scared. And he's also a risk taker because in the story, he tries to enter Irene's house even with the consequence of him going to jail. The second character is Wilhelm, who is also the king of Bohemia, and I think he's a really impatient person because the way he busted into Sherlock's house without warning and not listening to the housekeeper gave an impression that he was a really stuck-up man. And when Sherlock and him entered Irene's home to find a photo, and when they found the wrong photo, he started shouting and was really angry. And also, he isn't very smart because Sherlock saw through his mask and his disguise in the beginning of the book. And the third character is Irene Adler, who is the ex-wife of the King of Bohemia. And my first impression of her was that she was really smart and she can think very fast. And she was so smart that she even outsmarted Sherlock and Watson and tricked them into finding the wrong photo. She's also really quick-minded as well, because as soon as she took Sherlock into her home after he got beat up, she saw through the disguise really quickly, and she acted fast and left London really quick and took the photo with her, knowing what Sherlock was going to do. And the last character is Dr. Watson, who is the assistant of Sherlock Holmes and is seen throughout all the books. And in this book specifically, he found a lot of clues and forensic evidence that helped him find who the unknown person who sent the letter was. And I also think he's a really loyal person, because when Sherlock asked Watson to help him to get into Irene's house, he agreed to do it even though they could have both gone to jail.